The adage says, blood is thicker than water. What it leaves out is how deeply that bond can cut when trust is broken within a family. My name is Joyce Ashland, and at 62, I learned a harsh truth. Even the deepest love can be twisted into something unrecognizable. The beautiful beach house, my sanctuary, and a testament to years of hard work, became the center of a family conflict I never imagined possible. Before I dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. And if anything I share resonates with you, please subscribe. I have more to come that I think you'll find meaningful. My life in Charleston, South Carolina, was, for the most part, a good one. I'd built a comfortable existence for myself. My real estate investments had paid off, allowing me a level of financial independence I was truly grateful for. I enjoyed the city's charm, the friendly people, and the gentle pace of life. But the brightest spot in my life was always my son, Garrett. Garrett had been my rock, especially after we lost his father, Jared. It happened so suddenly, a boating accident, when Garrett was just 12. That kind of loss etches itself onto your soul. We leaned on each other, Garrett and I, and our bond grew incredibly strong. I poured all my love and energy into raising him, wanting to make sure he felt secure and supported. He was a good kid, grew into a fine young man, and made me so proud. As Garrett got older, started his career, and began thinking about his future, I felt a quiet contentment. I had my own life, my friends, my interests, but knowing Garrett was happy was paramount. And he seemed happy. He had a good job, a nice apartment, and then he met Belinda. Garrett was so excited to introduce Belinda to me. He spoke of her with such enthusiasm, describing her as intelligent, ambitious, and beautiful. Of course, as a mother, you always hold your breath a little when your child brings someone new into their life. You want so much for them to find happiness, but you also have that protective instinct, that little voice in the back of your head that whispers, "Is this the right person?" When I finally met Belinda, my first impression was polite. She was indeed beautiful, with a striking presence. She was well-spoken and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We had lunch at a lovely restaurant downtown, and the conversation flowed easily enough. However, as the afternoon went on, I started to pick up on certain undercurrents. Belinda asked a lot of questions about my finances, about my real estate holdings, and specifically about my beach house on Hilton Head Island. It's a place I cherish, a little piece of paradise I bought years ago. It's filled with memories of Jared and Garrett, a place where we spent countless happy summers. Belinda's interest wasn't overtly inappropriate, but it felt intense. She wanted to know about the property value, how often I used it, if I ever rented it out. It was as if she was assessing it, calculating its worth. I brushed it off at the time, telling myself I was being overly sensitive. After all, she was just getting to know me. But other little things began to surface. I noticed how Belinda would subtly try to control Garrett's decisions, steering him away from plans he'd made with his friends, suggesting alternative activities that suited her better. She had a way of framing her suggestions as for his own good, but it felt manipulative. There was an incident at a family dinner where she dismissed a story Garrett was telling about his childhood, saying it was boring. I saw the flicker of hurt in Garrett's eyes, quickly masked with a forced smile. It was small, but it was there. As time went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I wanted so much to be supportive of Garrett's relationship. I knew how important it was for him to have my blessing. But I also couldn't ignore the nagging unease in my gut. I started to reflect on the complexities of mother-son relationships, how easy it is for things to shift, for new dynamics to emerge when a partner enters the picture. The potential for in-law friction is a well-worn trope, but it's a trope for a reason. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I needed to give Belinda a chance. But deep down, a small voice whispered a warning. Pay attention, Joyce. Pay attention to the signs. And those signs, as subtle as they were about to become much, much clearer. Garrett and Belinda's wedding was a beautiful affair. I wanted to be nothing but supportive, to embrace Belinda as part of the family. I put aside my reservations, telling myself that love could conquer all, that my concerns were simply a mother's overprotective instincts. I smiled. I danced. I offered toasts filled with well wishes. But the truth is, the wedding, while lovely, didn't erase the unease I felt. If anything, it seemed to solidify the changes in Garrett's life. Changes that included Belinda's growing influence. In the weeks and months that followed the wedding, the subtle tensions I'd noticed before became more pronounced. Belinda's controlling behavior towards Garrett was harder to ignore. It wasn't always overt. It was often couched in terms of helping him, organizing his life, or making things easier for him. But underneath the facade of helpfulness, I saw a pattern of manipulation. She would interrupt him when he was talking, correcting his stories, or offering her own, more accurate version of events. She would make decisions for him without consulting him, choosing his clothes for social events, dictating his schedule, even deciding what he ate at restaurants. Garrett, bless his heart, seemed oblivious to it all. He was so smitten with Belinda, so eager to please her, that he didn't seem to notice how much of himself he was giving up. Or perhaps he noticed, but he was afraid to confront it. I witnessed several instances that made my heart ache. Once, Garrett was excited about a weekend fishing trip he'd planned with his old college buddies. Belinda dismissed the idea, saying it was a waste of time, and suggested a couple's retreat at a fancy resort instead. Garrett, after a moment of hesitation, agreed, his enthusiasm visibly dampened. Another time, at a family dinner, Garrett started to talk about a promotion he was hoping for at work. Belinda interjected, outlining her own career aspirations and how his potential promotion would benefit them as a couple. It felt like she was already spending his future earnings, treating his success as her own. Then there was the beach house. Oh, the beach house. It had always been my sanctuary, a place of peace and joy. After Jared passed away, it became even more special, a place where Garrett and I could escape and reconnect. But after the wedding, Belinda started expressing a strong interest in spending time there. At first, it seemed innocent enough. She would suggest weekend getaways, wanting to relax and enjoy the ocean breeze. However, it soon became clear that her interest went beyond simple relaxation. She began to pressure Garrett to spend more and more time at the beach house, often without even asking me if it was convenient. She would invite her own friends down, treating it as if it were her own property. I started to feel like an intruder in my own home. My privacy was being invaded. My boundaries were being trampled upon. Small incidents chipped away at my sense of peace. Belinda would rearrange furniture, change the decor, even throw away some of my personal belongings, claiming they were outdated. One weekend, I arrived at the beach house to find Belinda had organized a large party without my knowledge. There were people I didn't know, loud music blaring, and the house was a mess. I felt violated, like my personal space had been completely disregarded. I knew I needed to talk to someone. I couldn't keep these feelings bottled up inside. So, I confided in my dearest friend, Francine. Francine is a wise woman, a few years older than me, with a calm demeanor and a sharp mind. She's been a constant source of support throughout my life, especially after Jared's death. I poured out my heart to Francine, describing Belinda's behavior and my growing anxieties. Francine listened patiently, offering words of comfort and understanding. She didn't dismiss my feelings or tell me I was overreacting. Instead, she validated my concerns and offered practical advice. "Joyce," she said gently, "it sounds like your boundaries are being seriously tested. You have every right to feel upset. It's your home, your life. You shouldn't have to feel like a guest in your own space." Francine emphasized the importance of setting clear boundaries and communicating them effectively. She encouraged me to speak to Garrett, to express my feelings calmly and honestly. She also suggested that I start keeping a journal, documenting the incidents and my reactions. This, she said, would help me gain clarity and track the patterns of behavior. I took Francine's advice to heart. I started writing in a small notebook, recording the details of each incident, my emotions, and my thoughts. It was a therapeutic process, helping me to process my feelings and identify the specific ways in which my boundaries were being violated. But even with Francine's support and the catharsis of journaling, the tension continued to simmer. I knew that a confrontation was looming. The tide was turning, and I could feel the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. My high blood pressure had been a companion for several years. It was something I managed carefully with a strict daily medication regimen. 2 small pills, taken at the same time each morning, were my anchors, ensuring my health stayed on an even keel. I was meticulous about it, setting reminders on my phone, keeping my refills organized. It was a non-negotiable part of my day, a simple act of self-care that allowed me to live a full and active life. One sunny Saturday morning, Garrett and Belinda came to visit. They often stopped by on weekends, sometimes for a quick hello, sometimes for a longer visit. On this particular day, Belinda seemed unusually eager to help me around the house. She flitted from room to room, offering to tidy up, organize shelves, and generally make herself useful. I appreciated the gesture, or at least I tried to, but there was a certain overzealousness to her efforts, a way she seemed to be taking over, rearranging things according to her own preferences without asking me. I found myself trailing behind her, subtly putting things back where they belonged after she'd moved them. We were in the kitchen, and I had just taken my morning medication with a glass of water. I placed the pill container back in its usual spot in the cupboard above the counter. Belinda, meanwhile, was busying herself wiping down surfaces and reorganizing the spice rack. A few minutes later, as I was preparing some tea, I noticed Belinda holding my pill container. "Joyce," she said, her brow furrowed, "these look like they're expired." I frowned. "Expired? That's not possible. I just got a refill last week." I reached for the container, but she pulled it away slightly. "Well, the packaging looks old," she insisted, turning the container over in her hands. "And this date here," she squinted at the label. "It's hard to read, but it looks like last year." My heart sank. Surely not. I always checked the dates when I picked up my prescriptions. "Let me see, Belinda," I said, reaching for the container again, my voice a little sharper this time. She finally handed it over. I looked at the label carefully. The expiration date was clearly printed, well into the next year. "Belinda," I said, my voice rising in disbelief, "this medication is not expired. It's good for another year." Belinda shrugged, a dismissive gesture that sent a cold wave through me. "Oh, well, it looked old. I was just trying to help." "Trying to help?" I repeated, my voice trembling slightly. "You just threw away my medication, my blood pressure medication. Do you have any idea how important this is to my health?" Her nonchalance was infuriating. "Relax, Joyce. It was probably almost expired anyway. You can just get more, right?" Garrett, who had been in the living room, came into the kitchen, drawn by the raised voices. "What's going on?" he asked, looking from me to Belinda. "Your wife just threw away my blood pressure medication," I stated, my voice tight with anger and a growing sense of violation. Garrett looked at Belinda, a question in his eyes. Belinda quickly jumped in, offering her version of events. "I just thought they were old, Garrett. The packaging looked worn, and I thought I was doing Joyce a favor by getting rid of old stuff." "But you didn't even check the date, Belinda," I exclaimed. "You just assumed. This isn't some old magazine. This is my health we're talking about." To my dismay, Garrett sided with Belinda. "Mom, calm down. It was probably just a misunderstanding. Belinda was just trying to be helpful." Helpful? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Throwing away someone's vital medication without checking is not helpful, Garrett. It's reckless and irresponsible. Okay, Garrett said, trying to mediate. "Belinda made a mistake. She didn't mean any harm. We'll go to the pharmacy and get you a refill right away, Mom. What's the big deal?" "The big deal, Garrett," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and hurt, is that this wasn't just a mistake. It felt deliberate. It felt like a complete disregard for my well-being, for my health, and the fact that you're minimizing it, that you're immediately taking her side. My voice trailed off, the betrayal cutting deeper than I could express. Belinda stood there, arms crossed, a slight smirk on her face. She didn't offer a genuine apology, didn't acknowledge the potential harm she had caused. Her lack of remorse was like a slap in the face. In that moment, something shifted within me. The years of trying to be accommodating, of biting my tongue, of overlooking the subtle disrespect, it all came crashing down. This wasn't about a misplaced item or a careless error. This was about a fundamental lack of respect for me and my health. It felt like a deliberate act of control, a way for Belinda to assert her dominance, even over something as personal and vital as my medication. The casual dismissal, Garrett's immediate defense of Belinda, it all crystallized a truth I had been trying to ignore for too long. My generosity had been taken for granted, my boundaries repeatedly crossed, and this act of discarding my medication felt like the final straw. It wasn't just about the pills, it was about the underlying disrespect and the violation of my trust. A cold resolve settled within me. I looked at Belinda, then at Garrett, the hurt and anger hardening into a steely determination. "There are consequences for actions like this," I said, my voice low and steady. "Actions have consequences." And in that moment, I knew exactly what those consequences would be. The air in the kitchen crackled with unspoken tension. The argument, though not loud, felt heavy, each word carrying the weight of shattered trust and deepening resentment. I could see the defensiveness in Belinda's eyes, the way she refused to truly acknowledge the gravity of what she had done. And Garrett, caught in the uncomfortable middle, shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his gaze darting between his wife and me. "A mistake, Mom," he repeated, his voice laced with a plea for me to understand, to forgive. "She didn't mean anything by it." "But that's just it, Garrett," I countered, trying to keep my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Whether she meant harm or not, the impact was the same. My health was put at risk because of her carelessness, her assumption that she knew better than me about my own medication, and the lack of a sincere apology. The immediate defensiveness, it speaks volumes. Belinda finally spoke, her tone laced with irritation. "Honestly, Joyce, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. It was one little bottle of pills. We said we'd replace them. What's the big drama?" Her words felt like a fresh wave of disrespect. "The drama, Belinda," I said, my voice now firm and unwavering, "is about trust. It's about respect. It's about the fact that you felt entitled to handle my medication, something so personal and vital, without even a moment's consideration for my well-being." I looked directly at her, my gaze unwavering. "This isn't the first time, Belinda. There have been other incidents, small things perhaps, but they all point to a pattern of disregard for my boundaries, for my feelings, for my space." I thought of the constant pressure about the beach house, the rearranging of my belongings, the uninvited guests. It all coalesced into a clear picture of someone who felt entitled to take over. "And frankly," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "I've had enough. I've tried to be understanding, to be welcoming, but your actions have shown me that you don't respect me or my boundaries." A moment of clarity washed over me, a sense of self-preservation kicking in. I knew I had to draw a line, a clear and uncrossable line, for my own well-being. The thought of the beach house, my sanctuary, being treated with such casual disregard, intertwined with this violation of my health, fueled my resolve. I turned my attention fully to Belinda, my voice calm but resolute. "Belinda," I said, "your access to my beach house is revoked, effective immediately." The silence in the kitchen was thick enough to cut with a knife. Belinda's eyes widened in disbelief, her mouth slightly agape. Garrett looked stunned, his face a mixture of shock and confusion. "What?" Belinda finally sputtered, her voice incredulous. "You can't be serious. That's Garrett's family's beach house too." "It is my beach house, Belinda," I corrected her, my voice firm. "I bought it, I maintained it, and it is my decision who I allow there. Your actions today, coupled with your consistent disregard for my boundaries and my peace, have made it clear that you do not respect my property or me." Garrett finally found his voice, his tone pleading. "Mom, please, don't do this. It's just a beach house. Belinda made a mistake with the pills, but she didn't mean to. Don't let this escalate." "Garrett," I said, turning to my son, my voice filled with a sadness that belied my firm stance. "This isn't just about the beach house, and it's not just about the pills. It's about respect. It's about the way Belinda treats me, the way she tries to control situations, the way she minimizes my feelings. I have tried to overlook it, but this incident with my medication was a step too far." I could see the conflict raging within Garrett. He loved Belinda, I knew that. But I also knew that deep down, he understood my hurt. He had witnessed Belinda's behavior, even if he had often chosen to downplay it. Now, faced with my firm stance, he was caught in a painful dilemma, torn between his loyalty to his wife and his understanding of his mother's pain and the violation she had experienced. He looked from Belinda's angry, disbelieving face to my own, which I tried to keep neutral but firm. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. The weight of the situation pressing down on him, the line in the sand had been drawn. I had made my decision, a decision born out of a need for self-preservation and a desperate desire to reclaim my peace and my boundaries. The consequences of that decision, I knew, would ripple through the family. But in that moment, it felt like the only choice I had left. The tide had turned, and I was no longer willing to be swept away by the disrespect. The days following my declaration felt strange, heavy with an unspoken tension that permeated the air even when Garrett and Belinda weren't around. The silence in my Charleston home seemed louder, the familiar routines feeling hollow. I knew I needed space, time away from the immediate aftermath, to truly process what had happened and to fortify myself for whatever came next. So, I decided to go to the beach house. It had always been my refuge, a place where the sound of the waves could wash away worries, and the vastness of the ocean offered perspective. Now, more than ever, I needed that solace. I packed a bag, leaving a brief note for Garrett saying I needed some time alone, and drove the familiar route to Hilton Head. As I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar scent of salt and sunshine enveloped me. The house felt like a comforting embrace, a stark contrast to the turmoil I had left behind. I walked through the rooms, each one holding memories of happier times. Jared teaching Garrett to build sandcastles, family dinners on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, quiet mornings spent reading with the sound of the gulls. Now those memories were tinged with a sadness, a realization that the future I had envisioned, one where my son and his wife would share in this joy, was perhaps not to be. I sat on the porch, watching the waves crash against the shore, the rhythmic sound, a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. I spent the first few days in quiet contemplation. I reread old journals, looked through photo albums, and allowed myself to feel the full weight of my emotions. The anger at Belinda's blatant disrespect, the hurt at Garrett's initial defensiveness, and the underlying fear that my relationship with my son might be irrevocably damaged. It was during this time that Francine came to visit. She drove down from Charleston, her presence a comforting anchor in my solitude. She didn't pry or offer unsolicited advice. She simply sat with me, listened when I wanted to talk, and offered quiet companionship when words failed. We talked about the dynamics of relationships, about how sometimes love can become twisted by control and entitlement. Francine shared stories of other women she knew who had faced similar challenges with in-laws, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this experience. "Joyce," she said gently one evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. "Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is to set boundaries, even if it causes temporary pain. You have the right to protect your peace, your well-being, and your property. Belinda's actions were a clear violation, and you were right to respond." Francine helped me to see Belinda's behavior not as a simple mistake, but as a pattern of disrespect that needed to be addressed. She spoke about the importance of self-respect, of valuing your own needs, and not allowing others to constantly overstep. Our conversations were a lifeline, reinforcing my decision and giving me the strength to stand firm. Meanwhile, Garrett began to reach out. My phone would buzz with his calls and text messages. He expressed his concern, wanting to know if I was okay. He tried to explain Belinda's perspective, saying she felt misunderstood and that I was being too harsh. I responded to his messages briefly, letting him know I was all right, but that I needed more time to process everything. I wasn't ready to have a lengthy discussion, to rehash the argument. I needed space to solidify my own feelings and to ensure that any future conversation would come from a place of clarity and strength, not raw emotion. I knew Garrett was in a difficult position, torn between his loyalty to his wife and his love for his mother. But I also knew that I couldn't allow his discomfort to dictate my healing process. I needed to prioritize my own emotional well-being, even if it meant creating distance between us for a while. The beach house, once solely a place of joy, now became a sanctuary for healing and reflection. I walked the beach for hours, the vastness of the ocean, reminding me of the vastness of life and the importance of staying true to myself. I reread my journals, tracing the subtle shifts in my relationship with Belinda, the gradual erosion of my boundaries. The isolation, though initially difficult, became a necessary balm. It allowed me to reconnect with myself, to reaffirm my values, and to strengthen my resolve. I knew that when I eventually returned to Charleston and faced Garrett and Belinda again, I would do so with a clearer head and a stronger sense of self. The storm clouds might still be lingering, but I felt a sense of inner peace returning, a quiet strength that had been buried beneath layers of accommodation and unspoken resentment. The time for reflection was crucial, a necessary step in reclaiming my peace and preparing for whatever the future held. A week passed while I stayed at the beach house. The quiet solitude had allowed me to gather my thoughts and emotions. I knew I couldn't avoid a confrontation forever. Garrett called me several times, his voice a mixture of concern and frustration. He pleaded with me to come home, to talk things through. He insisted that Belinda was sorry, that she just didn't express it well. Finally, I agreed to meet. Garrett suggested we all sit down together at my Charleston home to try and resolve the situation. I agreed, but with a clear understanding in my own mind. I wasn't looking for a resolution that involved compromising on my boundaries. I was looking for clarity, for Belinda to understand the impact of her actions, and for Garrett to truly see what was happening. The meeting was as tense and emotionally charged as I had anticipated. The moment Belinda walked through the door, her body language was defensive, her arms crossed, her expression tight. Garrett looked anxious, his eyes flitting between us, trying to mediate the unspoken animosity that hung in the air. We sat in the living room, the silence punctuated only by the occasional nervous cough from Garrett. He started by saying he hoped we could all put this behind us, that it was causing a lot of unnecessary stress. Belinda jumped in, her tone immediately accusatory. "Honestly, Joyce, I think you're overreacting. It was a simple mistake with the pills, and the beach house thing is just petty. It feels like you're trying to punish me." I looked at her calmly, trying to keep my voice even. "Belinda, this isn't about punishment. It's about consequences. Your actions had a direct impact on my health and well-being, and your reaction afterward showed a complete lack of respect for me and my boundaries." "But I said I was sorry," Belinda exclaimed, though her tone lacked sincerity. "You said you were trying to help," I corrected her. "You didn't acknowledge the potential harm you caused, and you certainly didn't express any genuine remorse for the violation of trust." Garrett interjected, trying to smooth things over. "Look, Mom, Belinda can be a bit thoughtless sometimes, but she doesn't mean any harm. Can't we just move past this? Maybe Belinda can apologize properly now." He looked pointedly at Belinda. Belinda sighed dramatically. Fine. Joyce, I'm sorry if you were upset. I didn't realize it was such a big deal. Her apology felt hollow, devoid of any real understanding of my feelings. I shook my head slowly. Belinda, it wasn't just about the pills. It was about the pattern of behavior, the constant pushing of boundaries, the subtle attempts to control situations, the way you've treated my home as if it were your own. The medication incident was just the culmination of all of that. It showed a fundamental lack of respect. Belinda scoffed. Oh, here we go. Now I'm being accused of all sorts of things. I was just trying to be helpful. You're making me out to be some kind of monster. No one is calling you a monster, Belinda, I said, maintaining my composure. I'm simply stating how your actions have made me feel and the impact they've had. I need to feel respected in my own home, and I need to know that my health and well-being are taken seriously. I turned to Garrett, my voice softening slightly. Garrett, I love you very much. You are my son, and my relationship with you is incredibly important to me. But I also need you to understand my perspective. Belinda's behavior has created a rift, and I need to protect myself. Garrett looked from Belinda's indignant expression to my own, which I tried to keep firm, but filled with a quiet sadness. I could see a flicker of understanding in his eyes, a dawning realization that perhaps his initial assessment of the situation had been too quick, too biased. He hesitated for a moment, then spoke, his voice softer than before. Mom, I can see that you're really hurt. And what happened with the medication? That wasn't right, Belinda. You should have checked. Belinda shot him a sharp look, but Garrett didn't back down. He continued, his gaze now fixed on me. Mom, I understand why you revoked Belinda's access to the beach house. What happened was a serious breach of trust. His words were like a balm to my soul. It wasn't about winning or being right. It was about being seen, being heard, and having my feelings validated by my son. Belinda, however, was far from accepting this shift in Garrett's stance. Garrett, are you actually siding with her? After everything I've done for you? This isn't about sides, Belinda, Garrett said, his voice now firm. It's about respect for my mother, and what happened with her medication was disrespectful. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't the resolution I had initially hoped for. Belinda still seemed unwilling to truly acknowledge her wrongdoing. But Garrett's words were a significant step. He was starting to see the truth, to understand the validity of my feelings and the necessity of my boundaries. I reiterated my position calmly and firmly. My decision regarding the beach house stands, Belinda. It's not a punishment. It's a consequence of your actions, and a necessary step for me to regain my peace and protect my boundaries. I hope that in time, you can understand that. The meeting didn't end with a neat resolution. Belinda remained defensive, but Garrett's shift in understanding offered a glimmer of hope. The clarity I had sought was beginning to emerge, not through Belinda's acknowledgement, but through Garrett's growing awareness of the situation and the validity of my feelings. The confrontation had been difficult, but it had laid the groundwork for a potential shift in the family dynamic. The days that followed the tense meeting brought a subtle but significant shift in the dynamic. Garrett, it seemed, was truly starting to see Belinda's behavior through a new lens. The conversation we had, his acknowledgement of Belinda's disrespect towards me, appeared to have planted a seed of doubt in his mind. He became quieter, more reflective. I noticed him observing Belinda more closely, the way she interacted not only with me, but with others. I saw him wince slightly when she interrupted a friend during a phone call, or when she made a dismissive comment about a colleague's work ethic. It was as if the scales were beginning to fall from his eyes. He started asking me more questions, not defensively, but with a genuine desire to understand my perspective. He would bring up past incidents, things I had mentioned in my journal, or during our conversations with Francine, and ask for more details, wanting to know how those situations had made me feel. It was a slow process, but I could see the genuine effort he was making to understand. He was grappling with the realization that the woman he loved might not be the person he had initially believed her to be. The image he had built of Belinda was starting to crack under the weight of her actions. The consequences of the conflict began to ripple through Garrett and Belinda's marriage. The easygoing camaraderie I had once observed between them seemed to have faded. There were more silences, more strained interactions. I heard snippets of their arguments during Garrett's phone calls. Belinda's voice sharp and accusatory, Garrett's weary and defensive. Garrett started spending more time alone, often coming over to my house just to talk. Not about Belinda, but about other things. His work, his hobbies, memories of his father. It was as if he was seeking refuge in the familiar comfort of our bond. A safe space away from the growing tension in his own home. He also began to take responsibility for his own role in allowing the situation with Belinda to escalate. He admitted that he had been so eager for me to like her, so afraid of causing conflict, that he had often downplayed her behavior and dismissed my concerns. "I should have listened to you more, Mom," he said one afternoon, sitting in my living room, a look of genuine regret on his face. I was so focused on making everything okay that I didn't see what was really happening. I didn't see how her actions were affecting you. His willingness to acknowledge his part in the situation was a significant step forward in our relationship. It showed me that he was truly understanding the depth of the issue and taking responsibility for his past in action. Meanwhile, I continued my own healing journey. The time spent at the beach house had been restorative, and I carried that sense of inner peace back to Charleston. I focused on nurturing my friendships, spending time with Francine and other supportive women in my life. We went to museums, had lunch dates, and shared stories and laughter. These connections reminded me that my life was rich and full, independent of Garrett's relationship. I also rediscovered old hobbies: painting, gardening, reading. These activities brought me joy and helped to fill the space that had previously been occupied by worry and resentment. I was learning to prioritize my own well-being, to find strength in my independence, and to cultivate a sense of peace that couldn't be easily disrupted. The conflict with Belinda, though painful, had inadvertently led to a period of significant personal growth. I was learning the importance of setting firm boundaries and the strength that comes from standing up for yourself. I was also learning to forgive, not necessarily Belinda, but Garrett for his initial blindness, and myself for allowing the situation to go on for as long as it did. The tides were indeed shifting. Garrett was awakening to the reality of his marriage, and I was finding strength and healing in my own life. The future remained uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope that things could eventually find a new, healthier equilibrium. The storm might not have completely passed, but the clouds were beginning to break apart, allowing glimpses of sunlight to shine through. A few weeks after our tense meeting, I received a phone call from Garrett. His voice was different this time, softer, more earnest. He asked if he could come over, just to talk. I hesitated for a moment, still wary, but the change in his tone gave me a sliver of hope. I agreed. When he arrived, he looked tired, the weight of the ongoing conflict evident in his eyes. He sat down across from me in the living room, and for a long moment, he just looked at his hands. Then he looked up at me, and I saw a genuine remorse in his expression that I hadn't seen before. "Mom," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I finally understand how much I messed up. I was so caught up in trying to make Belinda happy that I didn't see how her actions were hurting you, how they were disrespecting you," he continued, his words tumbling out, raw and sincere. "What happened with your medication? That was unacceptable. There's no excuse for it. And the way I defended Belinda minimized your feelings. I was wrong. You're my mother, and I should have stood up for you. I should have listened to you." He acknowledged the pain I had been through, the violation of trust, the feeling of being disregarded in my own home. He didn't try to excuse Belinda's behavior or his own. He simply took responsibility for his part in the conflict, expressing a deep regret for the hurt he had caused. His apology felt genuine, heartfelt. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, the understanding that had finally dawned on him. It wasn't just words. It felt like a true acknowledgement of the pain I had endured. My heart softened. Garrett was my son, and our bond was something I cherished deeply. Seeing him finally understand, finally take responsibility, was a relief. With a deep breath, I reached across the small space between us and took his hand. "Garrett," I said, my voice filled with a mixture of sadness and forgiveness. "I appreciate you saying that. It hasn't been easy. I felt betrayed, not just by Belinda, but by you too, when you didn't seem to see what was happening." He squeezed my hand. "I know, Mom, and I'm truly sorry. I want to rebuild our relationship, to be the son you deserve. Can you ever forgive me?" My generous spirit, the deep love I had for my son, wouldn't allow me to hold on to resentment. "Yes, Garrett," I said, a small smile gracing my lips. "I forgive you, but things need to be different. There needs to be honesty and respect between all of us." We talked for a long time that day, not just about the past, but about the future. We discussed the importance of clear communication and healthy boundaries. Garrett shared some of the difficulties he and Belinda had been facing, hinting at the strain the conflict had put on their marriage. Belinda's path, however, remained uncertain. Garrett didn't offer any excuses for her behavior, but he also didn't suggest that she had undergone a similar awakening. It seemed her journey of self-reflection, if it was happening at all, was still in its early stages. I made it clear to Garrett that while I forgave him, my boundaries with Belinda remained. Access to the beach house was still revoked, and I needed to see a genuine change in her behavior before I could even consider a different dynamic. Garrett understood and didn't try to push me. In the weeks that followed, our relationship began to heal. Garrett made an effort to spend time with me, just the two of us, rebuilding the connection we had once shared. There was an openness and honesty in our conversations that had been missing for a while. Belinda remained somewhat distant. She offered a few more perfunctory apologies, but there was still a lack of genuine understanding in her tone. Her interactions with me were polite, but guarded. It was clear that she still hadn't fully grasped the impact of her actions or the importance of respecting boundaries. Her journey, I realized, was her own. Whether she would eventually confront her behavior and make meaningful changes remained to be seen. But for Garrett and me, a new beginning was taking shape, built on a foundation of honesty, understanding, and a renewed appreciation for the strength of our mother-son bond. The reconciliation wasn't a complete erasure of the past, but it was a hopeful step towards a healthier future. Looking back on everything that happened, I can see how much I've learned. The conflict with Belinda, though deeply upsetting, ultimately became a catalyst for significant personal growth. It forced me to confront patterns of behavior I had allowed for too long. The way I had sometimes prioritized the comfort of others over my own well-being. The most important lesson I took away from it all was the absolute necessity of setting clear and firm boundaries. For years, I had operated under the assumption that love and family meant constant compromise, even when those compromises chipped away at my own peace and sense of self. Belinda's actions, especially the incident with my medication, served as a stark reminder that without boundaries, respect erodes, and relationships can become unbalanced, even toxic. I learned that saying no is not selfish. It's an act of self-preservation. Protecting my space, my health, and my emotional well-being is not something to feel guilty about. It's a fundamental right. The beach house, once almost a point of contention, now stands as a powerful symbol of my resilience. It's a reminder that I have the strength to protect what is mine, both materially and emotionally. My relationship with Garrett has also been transformed. The conflict forced us to have honest and difficult conversations that ultimately brought us closer. He now understands the importance of respecting my boundaries and the impact of Belinda's behavior. Our bond feels stronger, built on a foundation of open communication and mutual respect. As for Belinda, her path remains her own. I hope that in time, she will reflect on her actions and learn the importance of treating others with consideration and respect. For my part, I have accepted that our relationship may never be what I initially hoped for, and that's okay. My priority now is my own peace and the nurturing of healthy relationships with those who value and respect me. I've embraced a new chapter in my life, one where I feel stronger and more independent than ever before. I continue to enjoy my life in Charleston, my friendships, my hobbies, and of course, my beloved beach house on Hilton Head. It's a sanctuary, a place where I can relax, recharge, and remember the lessons I've learned. Life isn't always easy. Family dynamics can be complex and challenging, but I've come to realize that my own well-being has to be a priority. Setting boundaries, though sometimes difficult, is essential for maintaining healthy relationships and protecting your own peace. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever found yourself struggling to set boundaries within your own family? How do you navigate those difficult situations? And what are some of the ways you've learned to prioritize your own well-being when faced with challenging family dynamics? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your insights could be incredibly helpful to others who might be going through something similar. If this story has resonated with you, if you found any value in my experience, please take a moment to like this video. It helps others find stories like this. And if you want to hear more stories of resilience, empowerment, and navigating the complexities of life, make sure you subscribe to my channel. I share new stories regularly, and I wouldn't want you to miss out. Finally, if you know someone who might benefit from hearing this story, someone who might be struggling with similar family issues, or the importance of setting boundaries, please share this video with them. Sometimes, hearing someone else's experience can make all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story. It means the world to me.